Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Lucifer's Banker, Uncensored, the untold story of how I destroyed Swiss bank Secrecy, 2nd edition, by Bradley C. Birkenfeld. Read by Rick Adamson. Foreword by Peter Schweitzer. When we think of the color of money, most people first imagine the faded green of a U.S. dollar or the blue and reddish tints on a euro note. Passed from hand to hand, the light-colored bills ruffle gently, with shiny flecks of thread testifying to their authenticity. In business, money is black letters on the white background of a spreadsheet or a receipt. But in the world of political corruption and banking secrecy, that background itself goes dark, the better to obscure the digits that show evidence of tax evasion, money laundering, or influence peddling. Lucifer's Banker, Uncensored, descends into these dark places and exposes how wealthy people can hide their assets from the government and use those assets to help corrupt the very same governments. It is a practice that still goes on in many places around the world, but one that needs to be brought out of the deep darkness of secret records, numbered accounts, and offshore companies. Bradley Birkenfeld's courageous story shows how hard that really is. My experience parallels with Brad's revelations in many ways, but we work different sides of the street. He knows the financial ledgers, the account holders, and the faces behind those secure safe deposit boxes. In my work as an investigative journalist, I cannot ordinarily see those things. Instead, my team and I look at how those funds wind up influencing governments and buying politicians. A great example here is the connection between UBS and the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, Incorporated. I wrote a book in 2015 called Clinton Cash: How and Why Foreign Governments and Businesses Helped Make Bill and Hillary Rich, that revealed the activities of the Clintons' family charity, especially while Hillary was serving as President Obama's first Secretary of State. Our research found many coincidences and overlaps between actions by the Obama administration and the pattern of countless donations to the Clinton Foundation. But what my team did not discover was the vast tax-evading schemes that existed in certain overseas banking institutions that enabled wealthy Americans to hide their money, sometimes in very large quantities, from U.S. tax authorities. Although what these tax cheaters were doing was illegal in the United States, it was not only legal but encouraged in those foreign countries. Secret numbered accounts, laws that prohibited the disclosure of such accounts and assured absolute secrecy for the depositors, and elaborate investment schemes which enabled depositors to earn large profits, all invisible to the American tax authorities and prosecutors, were invisible to investigative reporters like me. Invisible, that is, until Bradley Birkenfeld came along with his tell-all story. No matter how many laws and regulations are enacted in any country, wealthy people will inevitably try to find ways to mask their wealth, its sources, and where it gets hidden. They can and do pay lots of money to financial experts to help them orchestrate this. Smart, wealthy people will always find a way to cheat the system. That is why Lucifer's Banker Uncensored is so important. Investigative journalists like me and the research team at the Government Accountability Institute must spend months, even years, sifting through records that often mask more than they reveal. But an insider who really knows the stories, motivations, names, and faces behind all those digits will always know more than we can glean. So when banking insider Bradley Birkenfeld became disgusted with the nefarious dealings he saw firsthand at UBS and decided to become a whistleblower, we must pay attention. Our reporting on Bill and Hillary Clinton's activities dovetails nicely with what you will learn here. We reported on how the former president received his largest paydays since leaving the White House while his wife was serving as Secretary of State. This included $1.8 million from TD Bank in Canada for giving 10 speeches over roughly a 2-year period, right around the time the bank was the largest shareholder in the Keystone XL pipeline project. Brad will tell you about how UBS Wealth Management paid the former president $1.5 million for a series of fireside chats Bill Clinton agreed to do for their high-net-worth clients. Not only that, UBS also donated more than $600,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Will it surprise you to learn these chats and contributions were happening right around the same time that his wife, the Secretary of State, was negotiating a sweetheart deal with the Swiss government on behalf of UBS? I use the example of the Clinton Foundation not to dwell on the past, but to make clear that its actions set a dangerous precedent that will be exploited again and again. These sorts of second-hand financial transactions that benefit the family estates of politicians like the Clintons and, more recently, Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Unlike the blatantly illegal tax cheat schemes created by UBS and the Swiss, these schemes are not actually illegal. Nothing prevents any cabinet officer from putting his or her spouse or family member on the speech circuit to begin collecting large paychecks from foreign entities or from running a family foundation that takes in hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign governments and international corporations while they are in office. I believe that needs to be corrected. As told in this riveting tale, until Bradley C. Birkenfeld disclosed the rampant Swiss banking tax fraud, financially powerful political donors and the politicians that reaped the bounty directly benefited from the corruption with impunity, all while the American people suffered. Lucifer's banker Uncensored should serve as a roadmap to help identify and correct the insidious corruption that has infiltrated nearly every level of government over the past several decades. All tax-paying Americans and foreign governments owe Brad a great debt of gratitude for both what he has revealed and the legal ordeal he went through while revealing it. Inside this rollicking tale of living big for a time is the story of how one man could single-handedly upend the methods and practices of the world's largest banking institution, UBS. I hope you will come to share the commitment to reforming our politics and our disclosure laws so that his historic work will not be in vain. Preface. Uncensored. There isn't enough makeup at Estee Lauder to cover up for that family's secret numbered bank accounts at UBS in Switzerland. Douglas K. Birkenfeld. On October 16, 2016, Lucifer's Banker made its worldwide debut at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. It was a cool, rainy night in the nation's capital, but that didn't dampen my victorious celebration, the culmination of a battle I'd been waging for 10 years. I was the secret Swiss private banker who'd come in from the cold, turned over reams of hard evidence to the U.S. government, broken the back of the Swiss secret numbered accounts, and become the most impactful financial whistleblower in history. Outside the press club, flatbed trailers roamed the streets with enormous billboards of my book cover and my smiling face. Inside, more than 150 guests, reporters, my faithful supporters, family, and friends enjoyed a sumptuous feast and drank flutes of champagne. Speeches were made, cameras flashed, books were signed, waves of applause vibrated the building, and there were hugs and congratulations all around. But all of that had come with a price. For my historic efforts, which included recovering billions of dollars for American taxpayers, the U.S. Department of Justice had turned on me and sent only me to prison for nearly 3 years. I'd been placed on probation and forbidden to travel internationally. I'd had my passport revoked, and they'd tried to muzzle me. And then the IRS had flipped the bird to the DOJ and given me a $104 million whistleblower award, the largest such payout in history. Talk about the fickle finger of fate. And still, telling my story turned out to have its own set of slings and arrows. With the manuscript of Lucifer's Banker ready to roll, literary agents and publishers loved my true tale of nefarious Swiss bankers and high-life adventures, until the deep state picked up the phone. Major publishers such as Hachette, Simon & Schuster, and St. Martin's Press were just about to sign contracts on the dotted line and then pulled out at the last minute. Doors slammed closed, emails went unanswered. No apologies given, just silence. I knew far too much. I'd named too many power players in my book, such as Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Kevin Costner, and Leonard Lauder. And powerful people have powerful friends. It seemed like game over, except that Birkenfelds never quit, and I found a publisher willing to take on the project. Yet again, just before the hardcover release, major players who were neck-deep in the Swiss bank account game, such as Costner and Lauder, threatened to sue if their names were exposed. Lawyers were howling like wolves at my publisher's door, and we had no choice but to censor Lucifer's Banker. The book was released and published in 7 foreign languages, to kudos and fantastic reviews all around, but that night at the National Press Club was a bittersweet event. Being censored was like declaring war, and I vowed to return. No more. With this new version, Lucifer's Banker Uncensored, the captains courageous at Republic Book Publishers have joined me in my battle to tell the whole truth and nothing but that. What you are about to hear has all the facts that were stripped from the original version and so much more, including a brand new chapter with new documents and photos relaying all the hair-raising adventures that transpired after that night in 2016 in Washington, D.C. This is my whole story with nothing held back. Many people tried to stop me before from exposing their nefarious misdeeds. Now they can face me in court. If you've never heard this story before, hang on for a wild ride. As the old adage goes, the truth shall set you free. Bradley C. Birkenfeld, The Isle of Malta, September 2020, www.lucifersbanker.com. Prologue. Fall Guy. I fear that foreign bankers, with their craftiness and tortuous tricks, will entirely control the exuberant riches of America and use it to systematically corrupt civilization. Otto von Bismarck, German Chancellor. January 8, 2010. Minersville, Pennsylvania. All roads that lead to federal prisons are long. There are no exits, no shortcuts to quicken the journey and dull the pain of anticipation. All such roads are built on decisions, with hairpin turns and lost highways. That final leg might involve a quick mile's ride from a courthouse or a 6-hour trip aboard a fume-choked prison bus, but it's always the payoff of a life gone crazy, and it always ends the same way. For me, the road to Schuylkill Federal Correctional Institution seemed endless on that freezing Friday morning. It was only an hour's drive from my hotel in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to the prison in some backwater town, but it felt like a year. Inside the Lexus, I could see my breath, and outside the snow fell in wind-whipped veils, making the blacktop slick and risky. I'd wanted to take the wheel myself, one last spin before they locked me up, but I'd been slapped with a curfew, branded with an ankle monitor, and didn't have a car anymore. So my older brother Doug, who's almost 6'4", like me, drove through the storm. I made a few last phone calls to friends from the car, but mostly we sat there in tight-lipped silence, heading for an appointment that neither of us wanted to keep. I knew this was going to be hard on Doug, maybe even more than on me. He was damn proud of me for what I'd done, blowing the top off the biggest banking and tax fraud conspiracy in history, and he was furious with the Department of Justice. Doug thought I deserved the Medal of Freedom instead of a pair of leg irons. I tried telling him it would be all right. "Hey, dude, chill out," I said, as I looked at his white-knuckled fingers gripping the wheel. "I can do 3 years in the slammer standing on my head." But Doug wasn't buying it. He was outraged, bitter, and vengeful, and since there's no point in pretending otherwise, I was too. I gave up on my phony bravado as the car entered a long curve through a forest of snow-slathered pines. The wheels suddenly lost traction, and the car started to drift, but Doug handled the skid like a Formula One driver, and he didn't slow down. He was hunched over the wheel, staring through the windshield where the wipers were on full and slapping at the snow. They sounded to me like a metronome attached to a time bomb. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but they did. "Take it easy, brother." I reached over and gripped his shoulder. "I'm in no rush." Doug finally smiled, but it was more like a death's head grin, and we both turned inward again. I've heard that when you're about to die a violent death, your whole life flashes before your eyes. Luckily, I've never experienced that, but I can say firsthand that when you're about to be locked up in prison, a similar phenomenon occurs. Yet my looking back felt more like some terminal disease, during which I had plenty of time to go over every joy and sorrow, plus all the perfect moves I'd made, and a couple of dumbass screw-ups. My life didn't flash before my eyes, it unwound slowly, like an old film on a rickety movie projector. I had no regrets, and I'm not a fan of pity parties, but there were things I sure as hell would have changed. For instance, I would never have trusted my Swiss bank bosses to have my back when I knew deep down that traits like integrity were not in their bones. And I would definitely not have gone to the U.S. Department of Justice expecting them to protect me while I handed them on a silver platter the biggest tax fraud scheme in history. Even at the ripe old age of 44, I still had faith in the American justice system. Well, you live and learn. What really occupied my mind as we drove were the things I'd miss, the lifestyle I'd worked my butt off to achieve, my parents and brothers, my friends, and my liberty. I knew that an hour from now I'd be faced with some very stark contrasts, the Disneyland of my life before today and the Tower of London after. I leaned back and closed my eyes, recalling my roller coaster ride. Just 2 years ago, I'd been living the kind of existence most men can only dream about, and the sights and smells and sensations of it all washed over me again like a warm Caribbean wave. And there I was, back in Geneva, Switzerland, lounging on the veranda of my luxury third-floor flat overlooking Cour de Rive. Steam curled from a fine china cup of espresso, and the orange pages of the Financial Times fluttered in the morning breeze. A mound of fresh strawberries from the farmer's market across the street glistened on my marble table, and the Swiss trams below were rolling back and forth like a Christmas morning train set. On Saturdays, my lively Eau Vive neighborhood was quiet. The cabarets shuttered at dawn, and I could hear the clops of horseshoes on cobblestones from a tourist carriage in the distance. Sunlight glinted off the snow-capped Swiss Alps, and Diana Krall jazz wafted through my tall French windows. My exotic Brazilian girlfriend, Thais, was still inside, relaxing on a pile of Persian pillows. We were both hungover, yet happily sated. I could still feel her skin, soft as Nepalese silk, and I could hear that provocative Portuguese accent calling out something that made me grin. "Bradley, come back into bed, darling, and bring that thing I love with you." It was one of those glorious weekends again, when we'd hop in my fire-red Ferrari 550 Maranello and take the drive to Zermatt, roaring through magnificent mountain passes, sunglasses glinting above our grins. My Swiss chalet was perched at the top of the picturesque town, where cars were forbidden, So we'd park at a small village near the base of the mountain range and take the cogwheel train up a long, steep valley to the summit. And finally, after one last climb, we'd arrive, standing breathless and thrilled before my picture window view of the Matterhorn. Maybe it wasn't so special, unless you're partial to magnums of Laurent Perrier champagne, fresh beluga caviar, or boxes of Churchill cigars just flown in from Havana. I guess it was nice if you like Frigor Swiss chocolates, Audemars Piguet watches, Brioni suits, and gorgeous girls who care only about pleasing you and having a great time. But just imagine all that, and then the best thing about it had all been paid for in cash. After all, it was all about the money, right? That's why I'd gone into international banking, gotten a master's degree at the university in La Tour de Paix, and put my nose to the grindstone in Geneva. That's why I was recruited for a coveted job at the Union Bank of Switzerland, UBS, the biggest and the best bank in the world. And once there, as the only American on an elite team of Swiss private bankers, I'd perfected my game, flying first class all over the world, staying in five-star resort hotels, and seducing scores of one-percenters into stashing their fortunes in secret Swiss numbered accounts, no questions asked. Armed with a big pair of cojones, financial smarts, and plenty of charm, I'd made millions of dollars for UBS, as well as for my clients, with a nice fat cut for myself. But now, as I thought it over, I knew it hadn't been about the money at all. I'd lived the life of an Ian Fleming character, which was all about the thrill, and that's a hunger that can get you buried. I might have kept at it, except it turned out I had this annoying itch called a conscience, and I'd finally discovered that the firm had no such thing at all. Those devious bastards at UBS, my nefarious Swiss bosses, had known all along that everything we were doing was in flagrant defiance of American tax laws, and I could wind up in prison till my goatee turned white. They were setting me up for a fall, along with my clients and colleagues, so I'd checkmated the Swiss mafiosi and jumped first. Problem was, I'd landed in the wrong lap. The U.S. Department of Justice was supposed to welcome me, protect me, thank me for being the first and only Swiss private banker to crack that impenetrable shell of Swiss secrecy and corruption, to ensure that American taxpayers would be cheated no more. But instead, the DOJ had reached out for my treasure trove with one slimy hand and slapped cuffs on me with the other. Scumbags. And that's being polite. I opened my eyes as the fury of it all welled up again from my guts, but then the scenery outside snapped me out of myself. You're not the only disgraced samurai around Birkenfeld. I was looking at coal country in Middle America, with its run-down houses and farms, smoke curling from cracked chimneys and rusty old cars perched on cinder blocks. I saw horses, the only mode of transport left when you can't afford overpriced gas, standing on snow-swept hills and nosing for scraps of green. I knew this had once been a place of American heroes, men who labored deep in the earth for that black stone their countrymen craved. Many had died in collapsing mines, and many more still would die from collapsing lungs. And now they were pariahs, cursed by the environmentalists, shunned by the politicians who'd sucked up their votes and tossed them away. Betrayed by their country, just like me. Except they'd never see a ski chalet in Zermatt. We passed a road sign, Minersville. Time to get my game face on. In short order, my ass would belong to the U.S. government. Payback for spilling the beans. Thanks a lot, Uncle Sam. But I had a surprise for the federal goons. All that Swiss glitz didn't mean that much to me. I'd grown up without it and could live just fine under the harshest conditions. After all, I'd made it through Norwich University in Vermont, one of the oldest and toughest private military academies in the nation, where every day dawned with push-ups in the snow, 10-mile ruck marches, relentless drill sergeants barking orders, hours of mind-bending classes, and then studying like crazy till midnight. I knew nothing like that would be happening at Schuylkill. The feds couldn't treat prisoners like ROTC cadets, which was sort of ironic because it might have cut down on the recidivism rate. Anyhow, I'd already decided that whatever they threw at me, I was going to beat them at their own game. I'd always been an avid fan of that old TV show, Hogan's Heroes, a World War II comedy about a bunch of Allied prisoners turning the tables on their Nazi wardens. So, Schuylkill was going to be my Stalag 13, and I was going to be Colonel Hogan. Bring it on, baby. I looked over at Doug. He's a handsome dude, better looking than me or our older brother Dave, with a full head of auburn hair and white teeth. Doug's a tough attorney, and when his ire's up, he sticks his big chin out and lasers his target with those cold blue eyes. Right now, his jaw was rippling. "You're pissed," I said. "Nah, I love taking my baby brother to prison. Maybe we can get Dave indicted on something so I can drive him too." I laughed at that. The minute you can't laugh anymore, you're finished. "Relax, dude," I said. "This'll all go by in a flash. You'll see." "I feel like I want to kill somebody," he seethed. "Somebody like Kevin Downing." I sure as hell agreed with Doug's urge. Kevin Downing was a senior prosecutor at the tax division of the Department of Justice, the one to whom I'd first brought my case. I'd handed him the keys to the kingdom, all the secrets of illicit Swiss banking, and he'd turned on me like a rabid dog. Doug, an attorney with impeccable ethics, viewed Kevin Downing as the profession's lowest life form, petty, hypocritical, self-serving, and basically a spiteful prick. "Anyone else on your list?" I asked. "After Downing? Yeah, Olenikov." Ah, yes, Igor Olenikov. Just the mention of his name made my blood boil, too. Olenikov was a Russian-born California real estate mogul, a multi-billionaire, and he'd been my biggest client at UBS. We'd met at one of those yacht marinas where every boat costs as much as a mansion, the crews all look like Abercrombie and Fitch poster boys, and the yacht owners' mistresses flash their silicone boobs and diamond bracelets right in front of the wives. I'd met with Olenikov again after that, and had introduced him to my colleague in Liechtenstein, Mario Stagel, a wizard at making money and identities disappear. Olenikov was big money, and he wanted a large chunk of it stashed away for a rainy day from the prying eyes of the IRS. So Mario had created 2 Liechtenstein trusts with 3 underlying Danish shell companies, with Olenikov as the ultimate beneficiary. Soon after that, I had $200 million of his U.S. real estate profits sitting in several UBS Swiss-numbered accounts. The only thing identifying Olenikov as the true account holder was an index card with his name on it and his code name. That card was locked in a safe at our Geneva headquarters, and the only ones who could access it were me and my boss, Christian Beauvais. No one else at UBS knew Olenikov's identity. Technically, nothing about this arrangement was illegal, unless Olenikov forgot to declare his Swiss stash of cash on his U.S. tax returns. I had plenty of wealthy American clients at UBS, and whether or not they filled out a W-9 was none of my business. But don't get me wrong, I wasn't a choir boy, and I knew what I was doing. And UBS kept hounding us hunters to bring in more rich folks with cash, so I'd send my conscience on sabbatical and played the game. It wasn't until I found out that my bosses were going to hang me out to dry that I took preemptive action and turned them in. Then the U.S. Department of Justice made me a deal I couldn't refuse. "Give us the names of your American account holders, Birkenfeld. All the names, or we're going to prosecute you too." Didn't leave me much choice. If you're going to blow the whistle, you don't get to select whom you'd like to protect. At the time, Igor Olenikov was the typical arrogant billionaire while being cheap as hell. I didn't feel bad about ratting him out because I figure he'd hire the best lawyers money could buy and wriggle out of it just fine. Igor even confided in me that he wished in his next life he could...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?